The official Department of Defense report from October 2019 is a masterclass in bureaucratic fiction. It states that Specialist Emma Hawkins and Specialist Tara Mitchell departed Forward Operating Base Chapman on a routine supply run. It states that their convoy was ambushed by insurgents. It states that despite the lack of recoverable remains, the sheer volume of blood found in the burned-out vehicles meant there could be no survivors. Case closed. Killed in action. Flags folded, handed to grieving families. The military promises never to leave a soldier behind, but for 5 years, Emma Hawkins and Tara Mitchell were left behind to rot in hell. The truth began to bleed out exactly 5 years later, not through an official investigation, but by a sheer, impossible accident. A Navy SEAL team, acting on bad intelligence, raided a militant compound in the remote mountains along the Afghan-Pakistani border. It was the wrong grid coordinate. The target wasn't there. But beneath the compound, in a hidden, lightless cellar, the operators found something that brought the raid to a dead halt. U.S. Army uniforms. Folded neatly, the name tapes still readable in the gloom. Hawkins. Mitchell. Dog tags tightly wrapped in plastic. A bundle of letters never sent. And on a concrete wall, there were scratches, hundreds of tiny, desperate lines carved into the stone. 1,826 scratches, exactly 5 years, and the final scratches were terrifyingly fresh. When Master Sergeant Curtis Boyd got the call at 0300 hours, the guilt that had been eating him alive for 5 years turned to ice in his veins. These were his soldiers. He was supposed to be on that convoy. The SEAL team commander on the other end of the line didn't mince words. He told Boyd that someone had been in that cellar very, very recently. 3 weeks later, Boyd stood in the freezing rain outside Fort Campbell's administrative building carrying a heavy evidence box and 3 weeks of slammed doors. He had tried to get military intelligence to listen. Every officer told him to let it go. But Boyd couldn't. Inside that box was a St. Christopher medallion that Emma Hawkins never took off. There was a wedding ring belonging to Tara Mitchell, and there was a piece of concrete cut directly from that cellar wall. When Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Sharp of Military Intelligence finally emerged, Boyd cornered her. Sharp was exhausted, reciting the official narrative that insurgents use those caves, that they steal uniforms. But Boyd had leveraged a favor from a lab technician. He knew the terrifying truth. The blood found on Tara's uniform in that cave wasn't 5 years old, it was 6 months old. Tara was type A positive, and she had been bleeding. Someone had been keeping them alive, moving them, using them. Sharp tried to hide behind protocol, but Boyd shattered her defenses. The SEAL team commander who had sent Boyd this highly classified evidence had broken every rule in the book to do it. His name was Jake Morrison. When Sharp typed that name into her secure database, the blood drained from her face. Jake Morrison was a Navy SEAL. But more importantly, in 2019, Jake Morrison was Tara Mitchell's husband. He had been forced to divorce her in absentia after she was declared dead. Now, 5 years later, he had personally found his dead wife's wedding ring in a lightless cave, and instead of reporting it up the chain of command, he had vanished. Boyd had one more piece of evidence. A photograph of a letter found in the cellar, written in Tara's handwriting, addressed to Jake. It was a frantic warning. It spoke of a water station at grid 247.3. It said, "Look for us on October 20th. We tried to stop what they're planning. Please forgive me." October 20th was exactly 3 days away. Sharp didn't hesitate. They drove straight to Morrison's off-base apartment. The door was unlocked. The inside looked like the fever dream of a madman. The walls were plastered with satellite imagery of the Afghan-Pakistani border, connected by a chaotic web of red and blue string. Morrison hadn't gone crazy, he had gone hunting. He had spent 2 years running unauthorized satellite searches, paying off local informants with his own money, piecing together the ghost trail of 2 American women. Boyd and Sharp tore through his notebooks. The intelligence Morrison had gathered was staggering. He had tracked their movements from safe house to safe house. The notes painted a grim picture. Tara was dying. Advanced tuberculosis, kidney failure. The 6-month-old blood was from her failing lungs. Emma Hawkins, the quiet farm girl from Montana, had been keeping Tara alive through sheer feral willpower. She was the one fighting the guards. She was the one carrying Tara when she couldn't walk. Then Boyd's phone rang. It was Morrison. His voice was cold, professional, and entirely stripped of hope. Morrison knew they were in his apartment. He told them to listen closely. In 60 hours, a local warlord was executing a prisoner exchange at the water station at grid 247.3. But they were also moving their high-value insurance policies, the 2 American women. Morrison wasn't waiting for the U.S. government to mobilize a rescue that would surely leak and get the women killed. He had assembled a rogue team of 6 volunteer SEALs. They were going in, completely off the books. It was a suicide mission. 40 to 50 heavily armed fighters against a handful of rogue operators. Sharp tried to order him to stand down, invoking the chain of command. Morrison's control finally snapped. He screamed that the chain of command had left his wife to be tortured for 5 years. They had handed him a folded flag and told him to move on. He was not leaving her there for 5 more days. Before the line went dead, Morrison told Boyd what the rest of Tara's letter had said. It said that Emma kept her warm at night, that Emma sang to her, talked about the horses back in Montana, and refused to let her give up. Tara had asked Morrison to make sure that if only one of them made it out, it had to be Emma. Boyd looked at the map on the wall. He looked at Sharp. They were throwing away their careers, their pensions, and likely their lives. But they were going. The rogue strike team assembled in an abandoned warehouse outside Fort Campbell. 6 SEALs, Boyd, Sharp, and a former Special Operations combat medic named Rodriguez. Morrison laid out the assault plan. They would infiltrate disguised as arms dealers, using battered trucks and forged papers. They would hit the underground storage facility during the chaos of the morning prisoner exchange. But the intelligence was shifting rapidly. Thermal satellite imagery showed 43 enemy fighters at the compound. Below ground, the thermal scan picked up 2 small heat signatures, pressed tightly together in the freezing dark. Emma and Tara, still holding on. As they geared up, intelligence chatter intercepted by the CIA indicated that the Pakistani Intelligence Service, the ISI, had caught wind of the American prisoners. They were moving in to take the women for extreme political leverage. If the ISI got them, Emma and Tara would vanish into a black site forever. Morrison had to accelerate the timeline. They had to hit the compound that night. They crossed the border hidden in the back of a diesel-choked truck, posing as weapons smugglers. By 2100 hours, they were moving on foot through the mountains under night vision. The water station was sprawling, heavily fortified and crawling with fighters. As they set up their overwatch, they watched in horror as pristine military vehicles rolled into the compound. The Pakistani ISI had arrived early. There was no time for stealth. The raid was violently, deafeningly loud. Morrison's team opened up with suppressing fire from the high ground, a blinding storm of tracers and explosions. Boyd, alongside 2 SEALs, breached the underground storage hatch with bolt cutters. They descended into a corridor that smelled of death, human waste, and blood. At the end of the hall, behind a padlocked door, Boyd heard it. A soft, raspy voice. A lullaby. "Hush, little baby, don't you cry." Boyd shattered the padlock and kicked the door open. In the beam of his tactical light, he saw them. They were little more than skeletons wrapped in filthy rags. Emma Hawkins was sitting against the wall, fiercely cradling Tara's unconscious, rattling body. When the light hit them, Emma didn't cower. She lunged like a wild animal, her nails tearing at the medic who tried to touch Tara. She was screaming that they weren't real, that it was another trick, another fake rescue meant to break them. Boyd grabbed her. He told her his name. He looked into the wild, hollow eyes of the soldier he had commanded 5 years ago. Emma reached up, her trembling fingers touching his face to see if he was solid. "Boyd," she whispered, before her voice broke into dry, agonizing sobs. The extraction was a descent into absolute chaos. RPGs shredded the buildings around them. Boyd carried Emma, who weighed almost nothing. The SEALs carried Tara on a litter, Rodriguez desperately pumping saline into her failing veins. They threw them into the back of the idling trucks just as Morrison sprinted out of the command building, his arm shattered, clutching a metal lockbox he had torn from the warlord's safe. The trucks tore away into the desert night, leaving a burning compound behind them. In the back of the violently swaying truck, Morrison crawled to the litter. After 5 years of mourning, of guilt, of agonizing searches, he finally took his wife's hand. Tara Mitchell opened her eyes. They were glazed with fever and pain, but she saw him. She smiled. She whispered that she had kept her promise. She had kept Emma alive. Emma was begging her to hold on. Rodriguez was doing everything humanly possible, but 5 years of torture, starvation, and disease had taken their toll. An hour from the border, Tara Mitchell's breathing stopped. Despite the CPR, the adrenaline, the desperate pleas of her husband and her best friend, Tara died. She died free, holding the hand of the man she loved, while Emma sang her that same lullaby into the dark. The physical rescue was over, but the true horror of what happened to them was just beginning to unspool. At Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, Emma sat in the corner of a sterile psychiatric room, her back firmly pressed against the wall so she could watch the door. She refused to sleep. She refused pain medication because it made her mind fuzzy. Her back was a map of horrific, systematic torture, but her mind was a steel trap. When military intelligence finally came to debrief her, they treated her like a fragile, broken victim. Emma shattered that illusion immediately. She didn't just survive 5 years in a hole, she had weaponized her captivity. Tara had told her that information was ammunition. To stay sane, the two women had memorized every single detail of their imprisonment. Every guard rotation, every radio frequency, every accent. And then, Emma dropped the bombshell that would rock the United States government to its core. They weren't captured by chance. They were sold. Emma named 3 American private military contractors, Davidson, Reeves, and Campbell, operatives for a defense firm called Stronghold Solutions. They had sold the convoy route to insurgents for $50,000. Over the years, these contractors had visited the compound, they took proof-of-life photos, they brought just enough antibiotics to keep the women breathing so they wouldn't lose their $20 million bargaining chips. It was a human trafficking ring operating inside the American military-industrial complex. But Emma wasn't done. Morrison opened the blood-stained lockbox he had taken from the compound. Inside were dozens of photos, ledgers, and 2 tiny journals. Tara and Emma had hidden them for years. Tara's journal revealed the ultimate sacrifice. In the final 6 months, knowing she was dying, Tara had secretly stopped eating. She had forced her meager rations onto Emma, ensuring that the younger, stronger woman would survive to tell the world what happened. Immersed with Emma's flawless intelligence, the rogue team went on the offensive. They leaked information to Dubai security, resulting in the immediate arrest of the 3 Stronghold contractors. Emma personally faced Davidson in an interrogation room. She looked at the man who had traded 5 years of her life and Tara's life for $50,000. She broke him. Davidson gave up the location of a heavily guarded facility north of Miramshah. Because Emma and Tara weren't the only ones. Over the next few weeks, acting on Emma's intelligence and Morrison's relentless coordination, JSOC and allied forces launched a series of Black Ops raids across the region. They didn't just find 1 or 2 hostages. They pulled 17 allied prisoners out of the dark. contractors, journalists, and soldiers who had been written off as dead. Some had been missing for 2 years. One had been there for 7. Emma met every single one of them at the hospital. She sat with them in their darkest moments, a living testament that a person could walk through the fires of hell and come out unbreakable. But the conspiracy went deeper. Financial tracking algorithms finally linked the stronghold contractors to the true mastermind, Colonel Marcus Webb, the decorated American officer who had classified Emma and Tara's fateful 2019 convoy as routine, stripping it of air support. Webb had been running the trafficking ring for 8 years. When Webb realized Emma was hunting him, he called her. He offered her the coordinates of 3 more dying Americans if she agreed to back off and disappear. Emma took the coordinates. She saved the 3 Americans, and then she gave Webb's location to Jake Morrison. A few days later, Colonel Marcus Webb suffered a fatal, entirely unexplained training accident in Yemen. 6 months after the raid, Emma Hawkins sat before a highly publicized congressional hearing. She wasn't a victim seeking pity. She was the deputy director of the newly formed Office of Missing Personnel Recovery. The legislation that created it was called the Mitchell-Hawkins Act, guaranteeing that no American would ever be written off and abandoned again. She testified to the corruption, the torture, and the horrific cost of bureaucratic apathy. But mostly, she testified about Tara, the woman who had strangled a guard with her bare hands to keep them from being separated, the woman who had starved herself so her sister-in-arms could live. On a rainy afternoon, exactly 1 year after the rescue, Emma stood at Arlington National Cemetery. She wasn't there for a funeral. She was there to visit a monument etched with 43 names, 43 men and women who had been recovered because 2 soldiers in a lightless cellar decided they would not be forgotten. Emma knelt by Tara Mitchell's headstone. She placed a small stone on the granite, joining hundreds of others left by the people whose lives Tara had bought with her own. 37 saved. 6 were still missing. Emma stood up, turning her collar against the wind. Her phone buzzed in her pocket with new intelligence, a new coordinate, a new heat signature in the dark. For 5 years, she had counted days on a concrete wall. She didn't count days anymore. Now she counted lives, and she would never, ever stop counting.
If you are still here, it means this story captivated you. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. We read every comment. Until next time.